Okay. Hello everybody. Wow, it's a big room and a small group of people. Feel free to come forward if you like, but I guess we have some people online. I'm not sure how many, but welcome to farmer-led breeding projects across Canada. My name is David Catzel. I'll be facilitating the session, and we're going to hear from 5 Canadian farmer breeders and some of their stories. We're just going to run through all the stories. We have 2 people live, and then there's going to be 3 recordings, so we're going to follow up with questions and answers afterwards. Just remind everybody about the community agreements as we ask questions and have some conversation afterwards. Probably read these a few times, but speak for yourselves, be as present as possible, aware who's missing in the conversation, critique ideas, not people. And if you need to get up and move around, feel free to. Give grace for technical and logistical difficulties, which I'll probably have momentarily, and aim for connection, not perfection. So, speaking of technical difficulties, where do I find the next presentation? Escape, right. Oh. Forward. And then where? Oh, I see. I just click on that. Okay, great. Yeah. Great. Okay. So this is going to be our order of speakers. I'm just going to we're going to start with a brief land acknowledgement, introduction and context, and then we'll hear from all the farmer breeders. So land acknowledgement, we often give land acknowledgements where we are. I think what I'd like to think about in terms of a land acknowledgement these days is a map like this doesn't have defined borders. There's no imaginary 49th parallel, and there's multiple nations working together, overlapping and living together in a map like this. And it's very similar, I think, to how seeds work. And like land, seeds weren't seeded, they weren't given up, and we need to respect that they have origins, old and new. So just for the context, most organic vegetable seed in Canada is imported, a huge majority of it, with pretty much no public breeding programs to strengthen the industry in Canada. There used to be some in the past. There was a bit more extension help, but there really is very little today. And so it's often nonprofit organizations like the About a Family Initiative on Canadian Seed Security and other smaller ones that take on the work to do some of this breeding. And the farmers that are actually growing the seeds are doing the work out there. And we know that they are the experts that we need to be working with. So yeah, it's the small regional breeders and growers and farmers in organic systems, working in regional microclimates and really focusing on local market preferences rather than relying on internationally resourced seeds. So I think we'll just start off with presentations. I'm going to introduce Sylvestre from Grounded Acres Farm. Come up and yeah.
No, it's just going to move by itself? Or, with this? Yes. Okay, got it. Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming to our session. I know we're on the second day of this conference, and I think we're all getting a little bit it's been a lot to process, so thanks for sticking and choosing us this afternoon. So hopefully this is going to be a bit of a storytelling at the same time. It's not so technical, I think, from any of us. But yeah, my name is Sylvestre. I'm Grounded Acres Organic Farm that is in Gibson, British Columbia. I'm originally from Quebec, so I'm covering those 2 provinces in some ways, but I've been there for 20 years. And I'll give you a little bit of an introduction on my journey to get to what I'm doing right now, just to understand the kind of why I'm doing what I'm doing right now and why I'm not doing that great, but I'm trying my best. So where are we at here? Oh, it's that one. Okay. Okay, I see how that works. Technology. I'm going to get there. So I often talk about myself about being an accidental farmer. I was not aiming for that at all. But I got brought to a farm at some point, just storing kids, and saw the field, tried the field, never looked back. And I felt like breeding kind of came my life in that way, and a little bit. So in my early years farming, I'm farming about 20 years now. In the early years of farming, I was just kind of repeating the recipe that I was learning from my mentors at the time, mixed vegetable farming. And it actually took me 5 years to realize that most of the seeds I was using to start the journey were not from where we were. I mean, we talked about that a little bit at lunchtime, or this morning. But we have something in BC called West Coast seed, and we kind of all innocently don't ask questions like, oh, West Coast seed. West Coast, those seeds are coming from the West Coast, but they're not. They're just a distributor. So I came to realize that about 5 years into my farming journey, and really shifted my focus on seed at that point. And I wanted to learn everything I could find or learn about seeds. So I dabbled a little bit for a few years in that. And then a new breeding project started, which I gave birth to twins. So that kind of sidetracked me a little bit. A lot of fun, but different breeding, and it's not what I'm going to talk about right now. And I can't even give good advice about that either. I was just making it through. But it's kind of fun too. It brings you, slowly as they were growing up, they brought me back naturally into seeds are fun. That's actually was us cleaning some beans, and they decided to trash with their heads. I didn't try it. I would have probably get injured from that practice, and then you end up with beans in your hair sometime. It happens to me on a regular basis still. You go home and you're like, oh, what's that? I'm just going to introduce a few projects. Obviously, like a lot of people, I kind of got started on a visual basis, meaning walking the field, we were saving beans from a year to another. I didn't really consider breeding necessarily. I didn't think I had the skill, or that was for people that were, trained to do that. And walking the field, we were saving 2 different types of beans. That was back when I was at UBC Farm, and saw a different plant from things we had saved in the previous year. And visually identify different plant. Open it, pretty, safe, put in pocket. It was a very simple beginning in some ways, but beans is often a common denominator starters for a lot of people. They're just it's kind of an easy crop also to work with as seed saving if you haven't gone into seed saving yet. So, but in terms of the beans, I have a few lines I've been keeping. They're not really stable necessarily. They're just a fun, and also there was a lot of education going on at that time in terms of being at UBC Farm and all that, and they're a great tool for education and explaining segregation and so on and so forth. So I've kept a little bit of being going, but it's not one that I would say was keeping me necessarily going into that seed world or the breeding world. Then there's been other random projects that came through. One has been the leeks, and mainly that was the anarchist in me being the farm I was working on only grew hybrid leeks. I wanted to learn how to save leek seeds. And then I got stuck to that kind of it's a hybrid, I won't save it. I was damn you, no, I'm saving it. I'm going to reclaim it. So that was Belton back in the day that I don't know if I should say that out loud actually, but that I saved seeds from and started working with to just see how it would perform, and starting selecting out of that population. And then I went and called it melatonin, because melatonin. And I've been since this day working with this one. But again, leeks are not that sexy either. I love that crop, and I love working with it and having it, and it actually performed quite well as an OP, I found, for our region. Tomatillo, also another visual one that I started kind of working with a little bit, and interesting color, texture is a different, that fell into the fruit family too, and processing, and be able again to teach with. That was a fun one to work with. So that was a purple striped tomatillo that I work with, which was when I learned that actually tomatillo cross pretty readily. So I started with an accidental cross again, and then kept working with tomatillo. But the one that really stole my heart, and has still been the one that kept me going, has been the beets. And again, that was another unplanned breeding project. At UBC Farm, we were doing some variety trials, and part of the trial, there was some golden beets and Chioggia beets, and we were interested in finding out, well, now that we have identified some of the line and be able to describe them, what about the seed yield? Because some of those trials we were trying to link them into supporting the BC co-op that we were just starting at that time. And understanding is like, okay, even if we identify a good beet that grew well here and our producer wants, is it a good seed producer for our seed producer? So I was like, well, what about we grow the seed crop too? So we went and planted every single variety that was in the seed trial. We included golden and Chioggia, knowingly that most likely those seeds will get harvested, weighed, like clean and weighed, and then composted, like it was for sure going to have cross. So when we got to that point of like harvesting and doing it, I was like, well, let's wait a minute here. So I started saving individual plants that were where the plots were meeting for a higher chance of cross. I was like, that could be interesting. And we did that, replanted, did a few lines, progeny lines at that point to just check if there was cross, and indeed they have been cross going. So we went on with this. This has been a project, how long? I have it here somewhere. It's the 5th generation, so being biannual is about 10 years now. When I left UBC Farm to start my own farm, that I literally, like, I will not say stole, but didn't really ask permission. I just left with a crate of beets that were mine to plant them on my new farm. And this one, so basically the intention here with those beets is, I love beets personally. And there's nothing wrong technically with a Chioggia or a golden or red beets. They're all fantastic producing. We also, I should say, we're a mixed vegetable farm primarily, but there was something in those cross that came that was just stunning, just like that dark orange color with the stripes still quite present. And I don't think I couldn't find the proper photo. Actually, the next one is a little bit better in seeing the diversity that came out of that cross. And what we're trying to work with, the photo that are missing, that's one thing I'm trying to work a little bit more with now, is the top part of the beet, which is the stem. The core of the stem is actually like a very dark orange on the one that I also love, the inside, which is basically I'm looking for something that not as pink and pale as a Chioggia, that has more that orange color, but still the stripe. And then a stem that will have also that, and being recently crop, also the vigor of the top is quite, we know that from most, I don't know if any of you have grown Chioggia, but Chioggia tends to have a very strong, vigorous top, so it kept that property, but the color is quite different from that. But again, I'm not a plant breeder, and because I had 2 kids and started a farm, this project I've been a little bit on the I'm just maintaining the crop right now. So kind of the takeaway I wanted to bring with this, and part of the story is I always found them interesting. And we've been on their session mentioning that too, about that kind of, I feel almost as an imposter syndrome in farmers that start dabbling into breeding, because it's been something we've been raised in thinking this is for the academic people, and then farmer do their thing, and then you start thinking about it, it's like, it didn't start it that way. Our ancestors obviously had those skills and did it way better than people that were just in front of a computer trying to figure it out. So it's a bit of reclaiming that imposter syndrome or erase it from the way we're doing things. But it's also, I want to shine a line of how challenging it is, although those are, I call it my sexy project or my fun project, justifying the time in a day-to-day operation, because we're still paying the bill by selling vegetables at the farmer's market. I am a member of the BC co-op. I don't know if I mentioned that. And obviously I'm selling some seed, but it's definitely not, I don't even know if it meets the 1% of our revenue on our farm. So obviously, in the middle of the summer, having the seed crop calling, it's a good thing that I really love seeds, because we would probably always die, and I have lost some seed crops. So the prioritizing seed crop as a farmer it's an interesting journey I found, and I feel like we should have probably a synergy space about that. It's how do other people do it? Because I'm having a really hard time to start loving it if I'm not attached to a project. And this is what has been a learning journey for me, coming from UBC Farm, which I spent 9 years, and I was a paid staff. And I had people working alongside of me and like being able at least to feel I wasn't alone. Now I'm on my farm, and I am a little bit alone. And once in a while, someone will pop by and record a podcast about the story, and I'm like, oh yeah, I guess that was an interesting thing, or asked me to be here. I was like, yeah, I guess that's something fun and interesting. And like, but I'm having a hard time sometimes justifying being that farmer breeder and reconnect with the importance of that in our work as agrarian to some degree and just growing the veggies. But of course, every time I do work with seeds, I get reminded by the very manual labor that it involves in it, and it's a no-brainer that it has its space. So if anything, I know I've done my degree in soil and plant science, and I've done a course in plant breeding, and it's always like, pick your project, have a clear vision and all that. And if anything, I want to share here today is that you could that's a great goal, but this is not what often life brings you. And the best lesson I've ever learned and the best, more fun project I've ever learned is the one that just snuck on me and is stuck to me. And not to be afraid of those moments of like, what's happening, like what could happen, and challenging those potential outcomes to become something that you may not know that 10 years down the road, someone asks you to come up here and talk about it, like which I would have never guessed that. So I'll leave it there for me. I don't know, timing-wise, if I overdid it, nobody did give me any time, so I just kept talking, but I will let it go now. And I should mention the beets, if you're interested, it's not stabilized at all. I'm probably at about 30 to 40%. I still have some golden coming through, some Chioggia coming through, and even some red beets, which I have no idea where it's coming from. I'm selecting out, but they are now available through the co-op, and I'm selling now as rainbow beets until I achieve that kind of perfect beets that I'm actually seeking for, which may be another 10, 20 years, who knows. But and then we're going to Ontario.
Okay, great. So my name is Evalisa McIllfaterick, and I own and operate Root Cellar Gardens, which is a small market garden. We do some seed production, and it's located in the small town of South Gillies, which is in northern Ontario. And the project I'm going to talk about is one I've been working on for a few years with watermelon. So this project is an adaptation gardening or landrace breeding or kind of just diverse population style of a breeding project, the goal of which has really just been to find watermelon that actually want to grow in northern Ontario. And it started in 2020. I've been working on it since then, and it began with a gift of seeds that I got from Manish Kushwaha, who in 2019, I believe, planted out 22 varieties of watermelon in his garden, let them cross, ate a lot of watermelon, selected for flavor, and then the following year was really generous in sharing his seeds really widely. So I received some of those, planted them out, and that has grown into this project. And initially I thought it was just going to be a project that I quietly worked on my farm. And over the years it grew into being a farmer-led breeding project supported by the Ecological Farmers Association of Ontario. And so across the province, we had 5 different sites working with the same population of watermelons. So just to add a bit of geographical context, I'm growing in Thunder Bay, which is on the north shore of Lake Superior. We have about 90 days frost-free, so frost in June is not uncommon, and typically we plan for frost at the beginning of September. Manish, where the seeds came from, he farms in Ottawa, which is about 1,000 miles away. And we have cool nights but long summer days. Which kind of leads to the question of like why work with watermelons, and the answer is that conceivably watermelons can grow. We have enough days. We do have a lot of sun and heat in the summer. but I hadn't found any commercial varieties that I could rely on and have a kind of hit and miss success year after year after year. And I had about given up on watermelons, and then I heard Joseph Lofthouse talking about his approach to gardening using land races and just genetically diverse populations, and I wondered if that could work for me and the watermelons. And so the more I thought about it, the more I realized watermelons were actually probably a perfect crop to try working with this way, because they're outcrossers, but also if you're selecting for taste, which I definitely was. Watermelons are a lovely crop to get to taste. You eat them raw, right when you harvest them if you want. So it's really simple. And then the seed-saving piece is basically just intuitive. We're doing it anyways when we eat watermelon. And then the final reason I wanted to work with watermelon was just because they make people so happy. And they make me so happy. In Northern Ontario, nobody expects to find a watermelon growing in a garden. So they get happy even if it's only sort of ripe. People still smile and say it's amazing. So the way that we went about this project was really hands-off. We aimed to plant out at each of the sites at least 50 watermelons every summer. We'd plant them, we'd let them do their thing, we'd kind of just grow them the same way we're growing anything else in the garden. And then come harvest time, we would harvest what we had and select. We were trying to save seed from the first 25 ripe watermelons that tasted great, that came out of the garden each year. And then we'd hang on to seeds from whatever else that came later that was super interesting. But the goal was basically to try to collect seeds from what tasted great and was earliest in maturing. And we'd save those seeds and we'd plant them out, making sure we got some from each of the year's previous 25 watermelons. We'd plant those out the following year. We were not, unlike in this photo, taking very rigorous notes and very detailed observations. It was more kind of a process of getting to meet and getting to know the watermelons we were working with as opposed to kind of measuring them and analyzing them. And we definitely didn't do any hand crossing. We let all of kind of the crossing be taken care of by the pollinators. So I mentioned this was a collaborative project, and I'll just quickly introduce all of the other folks involved. We've got Manish from Gaia Organic Seeds in Ottawa. Catherine Rollenberg owns and operates Northern Seeds, which is in Farleton, Quebec, close to Ottawa. Aaron Halkovich and Aaliyah Sam, they run Morning Moon Farm, which is actually a market garden. They don't even do any seed production, but they got sucked in because watermelon is so fun to work with. They're near Thunder Bay. Jordan, Kyle, Xander, and Jana, over the years, have all been employees at Roots Community Food Center, which is a not-for-profit in the city of Thunder Bay. They do a lot of work around food access. They run an urban farm, and they love all things seed, so they have been working on this project too. There's myself. There's also the watermelons, who have done all of the work over the last 5 years of changing and adapting and responding. There's the pollinators who have done all the work with pollinating, the climate, the soil, the microbiome, really like all of these actors I consider collaborators in this project. And so in terms of outcomes, I feel like one of the biggest ones is just a recognition in for myself that I am not a watermelon breeder. I am a planter and taster and replanter of watermelons, and all of that other work is being done by this huge team of plants, insects, soil. It's like an assemblage. Agronomically speaking, watermelon's gone from a crop that I would be very surprised to get a harvest off of each year to one where I would now be surprised to not get a harvest off of. So not like a particularly quantitative analysis or measurement, but something that feels really significant for me in my garden. And then another unexpected outcome is just the fact that these watermelons have proven themselves to be a great kind of like gateway crop to seed saving. People have received these melons and taken it upon themselves to save these seeds and plant them out themselves, pass them on to friends or family that have gardens that they think should grow them, or even just return them to ourselves. So this picture here is something I found in the payment box of the self-serve veggie stand I have at the end of the driveway. So somebody had gotten some watermelons and decided that I needed to have some of the seeds back, which I just think is the most delightful consequence or unexpected outcome of this project. And so moving forward, I'm going to continue working with these watermelons. I think a number of the other growers that have been part of this project are continuing to work with them. These watermelons have also gone on to find new co-operators, different not-for-profits, community groups, farms, health units in and around northwestern Ontario, all supported by our local university, Lakehead University, in kind of a bigger project to help ultimately just increase the availability and accessibility of regionally adapted seeds in northwestern Ontario. And so insofar as tracking down seeds from this project, Going to Seed actually has some of these watermelon seeds as part of their Canadian Seed Share program. So that might be a great way if folks are interested. Otherwise, you can contact me through my website. Oh, hang on. Thanks.
I believe the next few are recordings. Let's see if I got the right order here. Were we in Quebec next? I think I'll...
Hey everybody, I'm Dan Brisebois here, and today I'm going to talk about breeding poppies for color, shape, and most importantly, fun. This is me. I'm one of the farmers of Tourne-Sol Cooperative Farm. We're based west of Montreal in Quebec in Canada, in the town of Les Cèdres. Here's our farm, and I'm here to talk mostly about seed stuff, but we're also vegetable growers. We grow 500 weekly CSA baskets, and then we also grow seeds, which is why we're here. We have a retail seed company, and we use some of the seed that most of the seed that we grow is for our seed company, but we do use some on farm also, including the poppies that I'm going to talk about. So let's get into so my other hat, other than farmer, is I also talk a lot about seeds. So I have a podcast, the Seed Growers Podcast, now called the Seed Farmer Podcast, where I interview different seed farmers, and we go in depth into all kinds of seedy topics. And then I have a new book by the same name, The Seed Farmer, which is why the podcast changed its name. And this is, whereas the podcast is more, I'm talking to other people about what they're doing, the book is more maybe from my perspective about how I approach seed work and trying to get market growers and all kinds of people to grow more seed on their farms. So, for the poppies, the initial cross that I'm going to talk about, or the initial cross to this project, began back in 2008. And this is not an actual picture of that initial cross, but I basically I got all the poppies I could from the Seeds of Diversity Canada and other different seed companies in my bioregion. I got all the different poppies, I grew them out, and then I wanted to cross them up. And something I've done before with brassica greens, with radishes, with other crops, just growing different varieties side by side and letting them naturally cross up. And the first thing I realized is that even though poppies have really showy flowers and do have pollinators walking on them, poppies seem to act more like selfers than crossers. So what I mean by that is if I had a white poppy, and I'm not sure about the genetics in this, but if I had a white poppy, for this example I'll tell you, if I had a white poppy and I kept the seeds of it, and it grew beside another variety that was red, and I kept the seeds of that white poppy, and then I grew them out a row of it, only a few of the plants had actually crossed with that other row. Most of them had self-pollinated. And that kind of surprised me because I've always heard that poppies were crossers. And so with the poppies, so it just changed the way I was going to breed it. It actually made the crossing harder, but it made once the cross had been made, it made it easier to select and stabilize what I was looking for. So So here's a field of poppies where we're growing different things. And what I want to highlight, and so there's actually 3 rows here. It's hard to see this, but there's 3 rows with different phenotypes appearing. And I've been trying to just comparing them visually. And if you look in, you can see there is some yellow flagging tape on a few of at least one of them. And so what I'm doing is when I see the blooms I like, I flag them. And you can see here, so this is a big red one I like. There's a yellow tag at the bottom of it. Here's a big white one that I like with a little bit of specks of pink in there and a yellow tag on it. It looks like I wrote something on it, though I can't read that from this angle. So the main way I was initially kind of growing out, and that's how I would catch the ones that had crossed. I would flag them, and then I'd be able to harvest that seed and then grow it out in the future. So that's the main thing that I've been doing initially. And that brings us sort of to now. I'm going to talk about the last year or 2 of the project and how I grow and select the poppies that I like, and also those that I don't like. I'll get into that in a moment. So this is what our seed production fields look like. So we have our seed production fields are separate than a lot of our vegetable fields, and in the case of poppies, what I do is I grow a section that's maybe 5 or 10 feet long with 2 rows, and I grow out that selection in that section, and maybe there's even like 3 or 4 poppies per like we start them indoors just to get a bit of a head start, and then I have 3 or 4 seeds, so I can see a lot of poppies in that area, even though it's a small area, and I alternate. Actually, in each section, I have a poppy and a corn poppy, which are 2 different species, so they don't cross together. And then before I get to another corn poppy and poppy, I probably grow like a radish or some other crop. And so even though poppies are selfers, I'm still isolating them a little bit in that context. And then I select within that group what I like. So this is... what I've decided is to share my notes. So I've tracked my selections in different ways, and what I've been doing lately is I just have a Google Doc that I open up on my phone, and I will type up some of the observations. So here, there's 8 selections that I was looking at in last year. So 24 is the last digits of 2024, and so there was 8 groups that I selected from 2023 that I was looking at this year. And when it says like -1 or -2, I've selected either an individual or a group out of there rather than the main population of plants. And so I'll go through these notes a little bit as I show you some of what I've been doing. So here's how it's labeled in the field. I have a laminated tag that says Poppy 2401, so I know it's that section. And this is what Poppy 2401 looks like. So it's kind of like a lavenderish, fluffy poppy. And there is some diversity that you can see showing up there in these slides. And I look at the pictures right here. I do think they're lovely, but it's not my favorite poppy. And I bring this here to show that even though I don't love this, when we do field walks with the team all love this. And so I was paying attention to what my teammates were saying, because I want to have more than just my perspective when I'm selecting. And so this is one of the varieties that got a lot of oohs and ahs from the team. So I decided to keep it, even though it's not something I would have necessarily gone for. And I tend to not like those single petal pet poppies so much. So this is 2401, and you can see, and the note says I just kept the whole population, and maybe I took out a couple that I really didn't like, or that other people didn't like, but it's a population. It's not a single plant selection or anything specific, but it's the 2401 was a population I kept. And so here's 2402, the next one I like. And so this is, some big pom-pom ones. I don't know if we're growing this one again. It didn't seem as special as we wanted, but this is just what that looked like. It was it's a pom-pom, mixed colors, pink, is a population. And then it got to 2403-1. And also, I've used flagging tape. I also have flags that I've put on just an individual I want to remember something about. So here's a star because I really like this one. And this is my favorite. It's a line I've been following for a few years, and it's getting a little bit more stable. It's kind of this bicolor, puffy, pink. Well, you can see it. And so this is what I really like. So that's how I marked it, is 2403-1 was my favorite two-color. And we also kept the population separate from it. So, and then you can see 2404. We're skipping. We're not keeping that one. I don't know what it looked like. And now I'm going to jump to the end of the line, 2408. And this one, the pictures I don't think do it justice, but they're overall pretty big, poofy poppies that are red for the most part, and the base, a lot of it, the base is purple, a little bit's white. You can't really see the base here. There is one individual that's not a big puffy one, but most of them are pretty stable in this. And so here, what you can see at the end, 2408 was there's also red and fluffy with purple, a bit, well, supposed to be say different. And then 2408-1 was a simple variant with no puff. And so those are the notes that I kept. I also take pictures, and that's how I track things. And so, so this is that single one that I did keep it as a separate. Now, at this point, we've gone through this, and we've been selecting for years. And for a long time, I just was keeping the selections to myself, but we're starting to release them. So here's a picture from our website, our poppy page. And you can see on here that there's 5 varieties. 2 of them are corn poppies. And then the 3 middle are poppies. And so that we have we're selling our mix. We've been selling it for years. People don't even know how much diversity is in this mix, but we just sell it as a mix of poppies. And then there's 2, PP102 and PP103 that are here. So 102 is that puppy one, 103 is that one I didn't like so much, but the team liked. And so I'm getting them online right now. So they don't have names at the moment here, but hopefully within a day or 2 they will have names, and folks are going to be able to purchase them. So this is the next step, is sending that out and seeing what people like. And we may only sell the seed until it's out, and then offer different selections in the future or not. I'm not 100% sure what's going to happen with this, but that's where these poppies are now. And then to wrap it up, so a couple of lessons. First, not all flashy flowers are crossers. So you shouldn't just assume something's a crosser because it has a big, nice flower. So it might be a selfer. You should also consider other folks' ideas of what is valuable. And it means in all kinds of ways, but I'm speaking specifically in breeding. When people pay attention to what other people like too, because if you're going to sell the seed or share the seed, it's not just your vision that you're sharing, it's you want to see something that resonates with the people who are going to be growing the crop, eating the vegetables, or looking at the flowers. And then the note-taking I have is pretty simple. I try to not do too much notes, and I take a lot of stuff with pictures to keep track of what's going on. And I don't have I actually do have a little bit of a spreadsheet with a lot of information in it, but most of it is pretty simple, all in all. And that's what I'd recommend for you. So I welcome you to stay in touch with me through, you can sign up to my newsletter or Instagram, and definitely listen to the podcast if that's the kind of thing that you want to hear more about. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Dan. I definitely got the spirit of fun throughout all the pictures that you showed in your presentation. So a question that I have is, you mentioned a lot that poppies are not selfers as you would...
Well, are selfers, they're not crossers.
They are selfers, they're not crossers as you would intuitively think. So, if someone was trying to cross 2 different poppies, is there anything that you did specifically, if you were trying to make a cross, or did you just end up growing a bunch of stuff out and just seeing what would come out from that?
Kind of that. Well, so what I did is I had grown rows of all the poppies that I had gotten from different seed exchanges and seed companies, and I kept... this is 15 years, 17 years ago, but I kept most of them separate, and then I would just grow the seed from that so if you try to make a cross at home and you have 2 lines, keep the seed from each variety separate, and then grow it out the next year. And what's nice about poppies versus if you're working with squash is that you can have 100 poppies in about 5 feet. So you can see a lot of individuals, and you could just go in and eliminate all the ones that you don't like. Or what I tend to do is I just flag the ones I do like and make sure that I keep that seed separate from the others. And you just need that one cross. And then that cross will create genetic diversity, and then you could maybe grow that cross beside another selection and see what happens. So once things have started to segregate into different colors and stuff, it's harder to see at that point what is still crossing and what is just segregating, at least in this system.
Well, yeah, that makes a lot of sense and seems to be very efficient compared to like doing something overly complicated. Given how, it's a lot easier to grow like a compact population of flowers compared to like a fruiting crop. And another question I had was, I loved how you brought your team into like walking through the flower, like the poppy fields, and seeing which ones they liked, not just what you liked. And I was wondering if you've brought anyone else like in your community in to like select for any poppies for any specific like shape or color or petal, because I feel like florists would be all over what you're doing.
So what like we do we do a lot of breeding work beyond just poppies, but whenever anybody comes to the farm, we go and show off what we're doing. And like I love to walk people through those fields. If we have farm tours, I make sure that people walk through them. If we have an open house, I make sure people walk through the selection plots. The challenge with poppies is that poppies bloom for 1 to 2 weeks. So it's a very short window, and if nobody's coming through in that period, they don't see it. So that's a challenge specifically with poppies, and I make a point during that time, even though it's busy, so it's like mid-July for us, by second, third week of July, maybe first, second, it's around then. Make a point of having the team come out and look at the poppies while they're there. So it's just harder for poppies specifically to bring other people in. In terms of florists, so on our farm, we actually grow a lot of poppies for bouquets, but we actually use them as pods. We don't use them as blooms because the petals fall off so easily. So we're really the petals that like what I'm selecting for in terms of petals is I'm selecting for what we see on our farm, and then what people might grow at home. But this is a harder crop to really be a cut flower. But one of the, and I didn't talk about this, but like one of the first things I really selected for in this population was actually pod size, because we wanted big fat pods. So almost all these poppies have really big fat pods. And so like some of this, so I have, in terms of selection, I have my own fields of seed crops that I have these parsed through them and that I select from. But then also in our cut flower beds, we'll have some growing, and I go walk there to see what happens because usually we're growing out the mixed populations, and I look for individuals I particularly love that just randomly show up there, and I'll flag that. And, keeping a few pods out of that is not going to compromise by any means the cut flower production. So that's kind of like a bonus selection area.
Yeah, I didn't really think of that, because usually when I think of selecting for poppies in relation to pod size, it's mainly for like edible poppy seeds, not flowers. But yeah, that is, a lot of florists also do use like the dried pods. Yeah, that's cool. And I think that's all the time we have generally. So that's everything.
Well, it's a pleasure, and I hope people go out and do some selection and breeding on their farms.
Well, hi there, and greetings from the other side of the continent, here in Nova Scotia, Canada. I'm Chris Sanford with Yonder Farm, and I'm here to share about a variety that we've been working with called Painted Island Cabbage. The illustration is a lovely watercolor done by an artist friend of ours that does our illustrations for all of our seed packets. So, next slide. So where we're located in Nova Scotia is what they call the South Shore, and we're in Lunenburg County. We're about 20 kilometers inland from the ocean, which gives us the maritime climate, but Nova Scotia is interesting where the farther inland you get from any of the coastlines, which of course there's a lot of coastline in Nova Scotia, the more sort of extreme you get in terms of colder winters and hotter summers. So we're sort of along a line that we mostly get that buffering effect from the ocean, but we're still inland, so we get really a lot hotter summers than right along the coast. And this is kind of important when I get into talking about working with the Tancook Island cabbage. Tancook Island is a few kilometers offshore into the ocean, sort of near where the Lunenburg is on the map, but farther into the ocean. So they have a very, very maritime climate with very cool and foggy conditions during the summer, and then very little freezing even in the winter. So very different depending on where you are in Nova Scotia. So our microclimate, we like it a lot for most things because we get the summer heat and a little bit of milder winters. My partner and I established a farm in 2012. We got into seed saving in the early 2000s, mainly from a sustainability point of view and self-sufficiency. And the more we did it, the more we loved it, and we started producing seeds commercially in 2009 before getting the farm. The pictures of the farm in 2021, kind of looking to the northwest, over our lovely Drumlin Hill, which is sort of glacial deposited rocks and soil. We have a nice deep and fertile soil, but it's quite rocky, so we're always dealing with rocks. We steward around 200 varieties, many of which have been with us for quite a bit. We have a lot of farm-adapted strains that we're very excited about, and also some farm-bred varieties. But I wanted to talk today about one of our flagship varieties, Tancook Island cabbage, that is a very rare local heirloom. Next slide. So a little bit of history about the cabbage variety. So Tancook Island, like I said, is situated off the coast a little bit. There's a ferry from Chester, Nova Scotia to get there. And they had a really interesting history from the time that it got settled. There was farming that got established on the island as well as fishing. So the farmers were also fishermen, and they actually developed a type of the fishing vessel called the Tancook schooner. That's now a popular design for a yacht, I guess, but it was actually designed with a very large space in the hull for transporting cabbage. And they would ship the cabbage to Halifax, which is the closest bigger port, and they would also be shipping barrels of sauerkraut. The picture there is of a cabbage house, a historic cabbage house that would be dug down into the ground and insulated, and they would store the cabbage heads, but also store the seed plants, because cabbage is a biennial, needing to be wintered over to bloom the next year. So, Tancook Island sauerkraut was an industry that started on the island, and it actually is listed in the Slow Food Arctic Taste, and is really well known to most Nova Scotians and just people in the whole maritime region. The brand itself actually just recently went out of business, unfortunately, but they had even moved off the island. But this whole history of Tancook Island sauerkraut was wrapped around this one particular variety of cabbage that was grown for 4 generations or 5 generations continuously on the island. We sort of fell into the growing the variety in 2016 because we were given 50 seeds directly from the island from a friend who had gone there. So we sort of fell into it, but really fell in love with the variety. Next slide. So we learned early on that it was a very rare variety, and there weren't many growers at all of the actual cabbage variety. So we wanted to first get to know the variety, but then also really increase the population. So we wanted to learn what we needed to select for, but also just increase our population growth. Historically, the cabbage was really large on Texas Island. There were reports of 20-pound heads. We found it's a very nice, sizable, and robust plant. We also learned the trick that one thing to select for was that there would be only 2 leaves kind of wrapping over each other, over the outer head. And I guess that made it preferable for them slicing for sauerkraut. Next slide. So, yeah, we did a number of grow outs. The first time we were just growing out the seeds we've been given, selected the best ones, wintered them over, and half of them made it. And we got 70 grams of seed, which felt pretty good for the first go. The Ross Farm Museum is a local historic farm museum that also had connected with the old growers of the variety on Sanford Island, and were taught how to produce the cottage seeds. And so we did a seed swap we wanted to just get a sense of what the variety was like, and if what we saved seeds from were good, and what theirs looked like, and that kind of thing. So, and I sort of set out with the goal to just increase the population and the genetic diversity as much as I could, knowing that there was no industry standard to fall back on if things went poorly. We also partnered with market vegetable growers who were really good at growing cabbage, so that I knew that we'd have good success. And they grew, 200 to 300 plants for us that we could select from. We selected the best ones, and we let them take the heads to market, which was very good for them to get something out of their efforts. And we wanted, because we were going for population, we figured we could try the wintering over just the stems to plant out. And that way we'd maybe get less seed per plant, but we'd have a really big population. And I did hold true, but we encountered a few challenges, one of which was that our hot summers, which are a lot hotter than Tanquis Island, and we were seeing a lot of the flowers aborting in the heat. We were getting like 30 to 35 degrees Celsius heat while the blooming was happening, and the flowers there was tons of pollinators all over them, but the flowers just fell off. So finally in 2021, I, just to save the seed crop, set up a sprinkler on blooming cabbage plants in the hottest days, and I managed to save our seed crop that way. But then I went back to trying to plant them out in the greenhouse or unheated hoop house like I had the first year we grew them, with the goal of getting them blooming earlier to beat the heat of the July temperatures. We had, not a lot of success in our grow outs in the last couple years, trying to just winter them over in not the best conditions. We didn't have our own cold cellar at our own farm. We were using a friend's farm and weren't able to monitor them. So this year we're very hopeful. We have 80 plus plants overwintering currently. Next slide, please. So we've learned a lot about the variety over the past 8 years or so, and one thing is just that it seems very well adapted to Tanquis Island conditions and the climate, so it's really not very cold hardy. We've grown it alongside other cabbages that after a light frost looked like nothing had happened, but the Tanquis cabbage the stems just turned to mush. So they really don't want to have a frost even hit them at all. They also really need insect netting. We've had better success with cutting the terminal buds before the winter or leaving the cabbage heads full to overwinter. And it does make amazing sauerkraut, the crispiest ever. And there's really good interest in this variety. In the years we've been able to offer it, it's been our best seller. Next slide. So moving forward, we just installed our own root cellar, so we're hoping to be able to better monitor the overwintering cabbage. This picture is from this year's harvest of the full plants, some of the harvest moving into the barn. We'd like to improve it for cold hardiness if we can, but it might be a bit of a challenge to get a big enough population to do that. We also noticed, if you notice in this picture, some of the heads are very nice and tight, and others have already started to kind of pop open. So there's really quite a lot of variation in how well it stands in the field. We're hoping for a good seed yield so that we can get it out there to other growers, that we can take a break on this variety and grow some other varieties of Brassica oleracea. And yeah, we just really would like to get this variety more out there. The Ross Farm Museum, the project champion, the site manager that started the project retired, and I haven't heard back from them if they're continuing it. And the only other source that I know of is the Seed Savers Exchange does have it in their collection. I haven't gotten a chance to assess their strain yet, but I'm in the process of reaching out to them now, so that hopefully I can follow it. Next slide. Yeah, that's it for my presentation. I hope that it piques some interest in some of you who maybe have experience with ground cabbage and would like to take it on. I think it would do quite well probably in the Pacific Northwest, the U.S., or close to B.C. And yeah, we love what we do and the relationship we get with our varieties, and feel free to head to our website if you want to learn more. Thanks very much.
Well, thanks, Chris. A question that our team had in relation to Tanka cabbage is, you've talked a lot about like the culinary history and the historical history of like this variety in like making sauerkraut. What is it about this variety specifically that is like so great for making sauerkraut?
Yeah, well, it's interesting. I've made sauerkraut from a lot of different cabbage, and I have other friends, the market growers that grew out the cabbage for us, have grown so many different varieties of cabbage over the years, and they're big sauerkraut makers. And they were a little disappointed with the variety, how well it stayed in the field, because they were used to growing a lot of hybrids that just stay good and you don't have to rush to harvest them. But after they made sauerkraut with it, they were converts. And it's something about lacto fermentation that some varieties stay really nice and crispy and others don't as well. So I'm not a food scientist to know the ins and outs of that, but it is really amazing how great the sauerkraut is that's made from it. We have a jar in the fridge right now that we're eating. It's so crunchy and crisp. So yeah, I don't know exactly what it is, but we definitely want to preserve that for sure.
Great. That sounds so delicious. Yeah, I'm so much for that.
Hey everybody, I'm Dan Brisebois here, and today I'm going to talk about breeding poppies for color, shape, and most importantly, fun.
Awesome. Well, hello everybody. I am Craig Boychuck, coming to you from Treaty 4 territory near Calder, Saskatchewan in Canada. And I am a plant breeder and seed grower. I run a small seed company called No Coast Seeds, focusing on seeds selected for short season gardens. And I'm here today to talk to you about Double Happiness Bicolor Zucchini, which is a breeding project I've been working on for some time. And we'll just get right into it. This is what it looks like. It is a lovely yellow and green zucchini. Mostly yellow with a green tip on the end. Yeah, they're pretty fantastic little plants. So Double Happiness came from the Zucchini Surprise Grex, which is an interbreeding mix of 2 yellow and 3 green zucchini varieties, which I sell just kind of as its own thing. But there were 4 goals for that project, and the first one was to just create a fun mix that makes a nicely varied zucchini crop. and to search for interesting yellow-green combos kind of in the realm of Zephyr, which is an F1 summer squash, more of like a crookneck kind of thing. I think that Johnny's has, but I haven't seen an OP thing like that, so it seemed like a cool opportunity. And I wanted to start working with controlled hand pollinations, and zucchini seemed like a fun and easy way to do that. So, and I also wanted to begin researching about zucchini color genetics in a more academic sort of way alongside the breeding project. So this is what zucchini surprise looks like when the fruits are, I guess, like at the vegetable marrow stage, pretty big, but kind of gives you an idea of the diversity of the population. You can see a couple of sort of softly bicolored plants in there. This is what they look like in more of a usual eating stage. So in 2019, I did the initial planting of those 5 varieties. It was a population of about 50 plants, so not super big, but I just wanted to kind of get things mixing. In 2020, which would be the F1, I found 2 bicolored plants and only got seeds from 1. So I decided to start making some casual hand pollinations, not tagging and taping the flowers, just moving pollen around from plants that were of different colors. And that was a population of about 70 plants. So in 2021, I had more bicolor plants, which was encouraging. About 10% of the population was bicolor. And so I kept going with the casual pollinations. And in 2022, I decided to officially branch off to another project for double happiness. And I decided to follow out 3 of my most promising lines from the previous year. So these are the parent lines. And I'm saying this is the F2 because the original cross probably happened in 2020. There weren't too many bicolor plants that year, so it's most likely that these arose from a cross then, which would have made 2021 the F1, and so we're into the F2 here now. So line 1 had a really good ratio. It was about 50-50 solid color to bicolor plants. Line 2 only made yellow fruit, and line 3 was mostly yellow with just 1 kind of weakly bicolor plant. And so the best one was this one on the left, which made 5 different bicolor phenotypes, 2 of which were super interesting, which you'll see later. And so I started to do controlled hand pollinations, but taping the flowers. I did some selfs a bunch of plants, and I crossed a bunch of plants with sort of the same phenotype, trying to, because I wanted to, ideally I'd like to stabilize this variety, but I just worked with whatever flowers were available just to kind of get things going and encourage a bunch of diversity. So, this is what the patch looked like. It was I planted things a little too closely together. The plants didn't mind it. It was just annoying to work with, but I certainly made do. So there's 100 plants in there. I limited the fruit set on my favorite plants, which I find like if you limit it to no more than say like four fruits per plant, I'm finding I get a better seed set, much just fatter seed and better quality. So this is what I was doing for taping and tags. It's not a great photo, but you can see I'm just using masking tape to close off the flowers in the morning, or in the evening rather, and then in the morning I come around, open them up, and pollinate them and tape them back up, which has worked pretty good. But I have discovered in the maxima population that bumblebees are getting in there and crossing up some of my self pollination, so I might move to something a little more secure. This is just gives you an idea of some of the self lines that I got in 2022. So kind of a variety of yellow and green combos. And these are some of the cross lines from 2022. And from those, for the F3, I decided to plant out 9 of the most promising looking lines, 4 self lines, and 4 crossed lines. So I ended up with about 6 lines per plant, which I had decided to do, but it ended up being kind of frustrating, and I wished I had gotten more plants per line, because it just kind of made for the ratios that I observed weren't as meaningful as they could have been with a bigger population. So the average ratio was about 1 to 3 bicolor to solid, not too bad. Like I said, pretty widespread of ratios within the self and the cross categories, so bigger populations would help me to have a little more confidence in those numbers actually meaning something. And so I hand pollinated my favorite plants with the best ratios, and got 16 lines to work with. Half were selfed, half were crossed. And this time I made note of the parents for each cross, so that I could more easily give preference to crosses of the same phenotype, again with the idea of going towards a stable variety. So here you can see noting the parents on the fruit on the right there. I've got them both down, and then I can refer back to my photos and make sure I'm staying organized and make sure I can just kind of like trace back and make sure the plants I'm working with are the ones that I actually meant to, because the colors of zucchinis fade as they age, and often I don't process these until January, and it can be hard if you don't have good photo documentation. So yeah, this year, or last year I should say, the F4, I planted out 5 self lines, aiming for about 20 plants per line, and I decided not to plant any of the cross lines just because I felt like the project was getting a little unwieldy. I didn't have enough space for more than 100 plants. So yeah, I just inserted that limitation. And I'm pretty happy I did, because the average ratio for bicolor to solid plants was up to 1.17 from about 1 to 3 last year, or 0.33. So that's about 3.5 times as many bicolor plants as last year, which is awesome. And that ratio was also kind of heavily drawn down by 2 lines who had lower ratios. Those were about 0.7, but the best 3 lines were up to almost 1.5. So I'm thinking that more plants per line is the way to go. 5 lines felt a little bit limiting, especially when those 2 of them underperformed, so it would be nice to have a little more to select from. And I also had an unexpected surprise when a new phenotype appeared. So far all of the plants have been making fruits that have like sort of a yellow body and a green tip, and these ones have a green tip by the stem and at the blossom end, which is super cool. So this is what they look like at tasty eating stage, and this is a little bit bigger, and here they are labeled for selection. So for 2024, my goals were to increase the number of bicolor plants, which I did. I wanted to plant out more plants per line, both self and cross lines, which I did, but decided to get rid of the cross lines, which I think was a good thing to do. Keep researching the color genetics, which I did not do, aside from planting the plants and continuing the project, and better record keeping, which I also did. Having stuff just on paper can be a little bit limiting. And adjust the plan based on new info. So for next year, I'm going to continue with this plan to increase the number of bicolor plants using only the self lines, none of the cross lines. I'm going to plant more lines and more plants per line so that I can have more chance for success in isolating plants that are and lines that are more stable. And I'm going to explore that new phenotype, which might mean extra zucchinis, but what the heck. And I'm going to continue the academic research of zucchini color genetics, which is pretty interesting, but yeah, a little daunting, especially when you're working with all of these plants. But I think it'd be good to understand the ins and outs of that. So you can check out all the stuff I'm working at my website, nocoseeds.ca. And if anybody wants to email me and talk about zucchini or other plant breeding, you can get me here. And yeah, that is Double Happiness Zucchini. Thank you very much for listening.
Cool. Thanks so much, Craig. Those zucchinis are beautiful.
Yeah, thanks.
I remember when I was looking through like your presentation and seeing how like it was the original bicolor and then the third like stripe came out, I was like, even better. yeah,
I was pretty stoked to find that.
Cool. So like a question that I thought of while I was listening to your presentation is, so you mentioned that like one of the tips or like tools that you used was just using masking tape to like close the flowers, but you mentioned like it wasn't always the best. And I know like later in your process you didn't really want to work with cross lines anymore. Have you been able to figure out like a way to go around, like finding a more efficient way to prevent them from pollinating each other, or are you still using the masking tape?
Yeah, well, I'm probably still going to use the tape, but I think I'm going to try bagging flowers this year. I was finding crosses in Maxima squash, which is, these are a pepo, cucurbita pepo squash. I don't know if that would make any difference, but I've never really experienced that before, and I've always used masking tape, so I was like, oh, maybe I should be more careful. But yeah, and as far as like selfed and crossed, in both of those cases, I'm doing the pollinations. Like I'm either taking it from two different plants and like, yeah, taking pollen from one plant and pollinating another plant, or using the same flowers from the same plant. But both of those cases, I'm doing the work, and I'm not leaving it up to insects.
Cool. And I know right now, like your biggest goal is to increase like the ratio of the fruit that have that pattern that you're looking for, but also stabilizing that trait. Are there any other traits that you're selecting for, like while you're doing this process, or is it mainly just color is the main thing right now?
Yeah, right now it is mostly color, although definitely like general plant health. Anything that's weak or susceptible to diseases always gets culled. But yeah, it's mostly just color. I have been tasting them, of course, and they're all pretty delicious. Sometimes zucchinis have this weird zucchini flavor, for lack of a better word. It's like, I don't know, just like mildly astringent or something. I haven't noticed a whole lot of that. So, but down the line, I might focus a little more on those things. But the color is going to be hard to get really stable. So, yeah, gonna just work on that for now. Yeah,
maybe there's a zucchini color genetic person listening to this presentation who can.
I hope so. Yeah, I've done some reading, but yeah, I haven't found a whole lot of like really specific info on it. So yeah, I'm hoping to dig that up in the future.
Cool. Yeah, thanks so much for your presentation.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, just maybe the... Okay, thanks everybody. We've got probably 10 for questions, and I believe that Chris is online with maybe a comment.
Yeah, thanks everybody. Chris left a comment here in the Zoom chat that I'm going to read out loud because we're not able to get audio out here, so imagine this is Chris. I realize a point that may not have come across clearly about overwintering the cabbage plants. They have done best for us if we trimmed the heads in the fall prior to winter storage, or if the terminal buds within the heads survived. If the terminal bud died over the winter, the plants would take a long time to adjust and send up side shoots, sometimes not even flowering in time, and not blooming simultaneously enough for good pollination. With our last 2 grow-outs, when we tried keeping the heads intact, a number of the terminal buds failed during storage. Once was due to being too wet, once was due to being too dry in storage. Go figure. Those plants had sporadic blooming, with some plants even choosing to make mini cabbage heads on the side shoots instead of blooming. This year, so far, it is looking very good that we managed to hit the Goldilocks zone for overwintering cabbage plants with their heads intact. Fingers are crossed for a good 2025 crop.
Okay, great. I'm not sure if there's other people online with questions, but people here are welcome to, I believe, there a mic on here? You're welcome to come up and use that and ask questions. Mel and Evalisa are here, and although there's not, it sounds like audio, Chris might be online to be able to ask questions too. So if there's any people online with questions or anybody in the audience, feel free to come on up. There's also yeah.
Hello? Oh, talk into it. My question is for Ev and Mel here. I think both of you touched on this idea that you're hesitant to take on certain breeding projects or call yourself breeders, even though that's kind of what you're doing. And I'd love to know if there's anything or anyone that's supported you in doing this work, despite, you describing challenges of feeling alone in doing this or finding the time with other farm work or other things in your life that take time away from it, and what others can do to, support you to continuing this work or incorporating it into the other work that you do.
So my hesitation in calling myself a breeder isn't so much that I don't feel supported. It's just that I honestly don't feel like I'm doing that. Like, I'm not doing the breeding. Should I just come up there? I actually feel really well supported. The EFAO and FAUDA, this conference, the resources that have been put out there. It does feel a little bit lonely, but the ability to work collaboratively makes kind of just the loneliness of farming, which is just kind of inevitable when you're in the field so often and really with your head down doing your thing. I think actually this work has really helped to make me feel part of a bigger community, whether that's other humans breeding or even just with the plants and places that I'm working with. Well, that answers your question.
Okay, it's not feedbacking on me. Yeah, I think similarly, it's not necessarily don't feel supported. I think it's a notion nowadays with farming and small margins and so on and so forth, it's just how to prioritize. So one thing that's been helping me personally and that could keep helping is having an organization that works out there kind of almost have a follow-up or a way to organize people to have maybe once a year checking in on project that's been happening, how it's been going, and I think there's a need and I love the way that you guys are set up, that you have 5 sites to test it out. There's this in itself can create that kind of connection. It's I'm not alone in this. And other people are commenting back. And I love what Dan said too about having people walking through and commenting and taking those comments back. So you're feeling that it's less of just a very narrow project, and other people in other perspective are so valuable. And so I think finding a way to connect those projects, even if it's just once a year we'll all meet online because we're so far away from each other and just talk about it, I think can give you that little boost, something it's fun. Yeah, I should keep doing this.
Are there any other questions here? I'm happy to bring you've got a mic.
Hey there. I was wondering about when I do tasting or sort of quality evaluations, I was just wondering what is your individual process for how do you cook the beets to tell you that that's a good beet? Is there multiple ways? Is there something that you're looking for, or what's your sort of magic for saying this one goes forward? And I think similarly with the watermelon, I'll still do have this thing where I use the same knife to cut every watermelon. because I want to know what that rind resistance feels like with that one knife or that one sharpness of knife. I just, there's little things that like when, what's your sort of little secret for saying that's a good one? What's that cathartic kind of trick that tells you this is what I'm doing, this is what goes forward?
Sadly, I haven't done much with the beets, mainly because raw beets are just, it's not terrible. They fit well in some recipes, but I love them cooked. In our case, for my beet project in a way, we're more at the stage of trying to stabilize the line first, and we've tasted them by default. Like I said, we sell them out of one bed or two beds of it at the farm. I'll save through the population. All the rest goes to the market. So by feedback, by just public feedback, people coming back and loving our beets, I know there's nothing wrong inherently. At one point, it would be nice to focus and make sure maybe within the population there may be some taste variation. That would be really interesting to look into that, but I haven't worked so much with it. I wish I had watermelon actually as a project instead of beets right now. Same for the leeks. I'm not interested to do that kind of tasting for the leeks. But again, leeks, same thing. We use them in our crop on our farm, and we sell those to our customers. I know that there's nothing wrong there. But for the beets, one thing I didn't mention, I do look at color, and I will do the shoulder after storage when I bring them out. But I set them all out in the field, and I always save about 2 to 3 times the amount of roots that I want to replant, and I just shred the shoulder and check the color, and that's how I will do the selection right now for those. And I'm still at the stage because there's enough variation. I'm trying not to be too hard either because I don't want to lose some of the aspect of the beets. Yeah, I'm still playing around, but yeah, taste-wise, not quite there yet. I don't know if you want to mention the hardship of tasting watermelon.
Yeah, so I love the idea of having a regular knife that you use. There's nothing regular about how we test the watermelons we do. It often we'll have a neighbor stop by the farm, and it just happens to be that time that there's a ripe melon that we can share, and we'll just cut it open with whatever we have available, and we'll just share it. And if people are happy and excited and they think it's great, then we'll save the seeds. And so it's not even me making all of those selections. I do have to eat a lot of watermelons, which is a huge hardship, but we get to do it in community too. With Tastings Roots Community Food Center, they're right in the city. They have a great setup. They do a lot of programming there. There's a lot of people kind of moving through their space, and so sometimes we'll just pull out a bunch of watermelons, cut them open, and invite people to come. And I think it's really just if people like eating it, then we'll save the seeds. Because if it can grow and people like eating it, that's really what we're interested in selecting for.
There's one question from somebody online, and it'll be read out with an answer.
Yes, in the Zoom chat, somebody asked Chris, what was the significance of deer swimming to the island? And Chris responded, when I visited Tancook Island in 2017, I was told that the nail in the coffin of the cabbage industry on the island, the white-tailed deer made fields of cabbage impossible. The island is not very large and has enough density of houses that make deer hunting impossible. So the island's population of deer has exploded in the last 30 years. Essentially, the deer eat the cabbage plants, and in order to grow gardens in the island, residents have to have tall deer fences. If the cabbage industry was strong enough, they could have perhaps fenced the cabbage fields, but it was a matter of scale for the industry. The island couldn't support a larger scale of agriculture, and demand dwindled for their cabbage and sauerkraut. The history of cabbage and sauerkraut industry on the island is pretty interesting. One aspect that enabled it to thrive was no deer to eat their crops.
All right. I think we have a few more minutes, probably enough time for one more question if we have it. Thanks.
When a fellow plant breeder gives you some variety of theirs to show off as a gift, you are a plant breeder.
Thank you very much.
One for each of the speakers.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
There's one more question, I believe back there. Okay.
I'm curious if any of you have used SeedLinked or any other variety trial networks, or if you could see having your varieties tested in a wider network having some benefit for what you're doing.
If you don't have an answer, I might have one for that one. But have you guys used SeedLinked or no? So not personally. However, I will just mention this year, FarmFolk, CityFolk, we do run a citizen seed trial, so it's a variety trial for gardeners, and the beets are actually in the trial this year, just to kind of observe them and get people looking at them. Unfortunately, shipping across that imaginary 49th parallel is a little tricky for that project, so you can join if you want, if you're on the side of that line, but we can't guarantee the seeds will get here. Yeah. And I think that's the end. I think we're at time, so thank you, everybody. Please remember to scan that and take a couple minutes to fill out the session evaluation. And thanks for coming.